Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samid.
So after a little bit of a hiatus, because everything else seems to get in the way sometimes, we are up to episode 24. And there's really, it's been a quiet week, Sam. There's not a whole lot to talk about.
No, we might as well, cut this one off after about 10 minutes because, frankly, nothing's happened today.
No, that's not true. Today, Mark Fields got fired, and there's all kinds of other stuff to talk about. But anyway, the first thing we're going to do is talk about what we've been driving. And Sam, you've been in the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio and the Super Duty, but I think we'd rather talk about the Quadrifoglio because that hauls ass and the truck just hauls. So
absolutely. That's the Quadrifoglio or the Giulia rather is the first new volume product from Alfa Romeo, since the announcement back in 2014 that they were going to launch 7 new vehicles by 2018. And somehow I suspect that they're not going to manage that.
Unless they drop like a vehicle a month for the next
6 months.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, this is the first of their new platform vehicles. It's a rear wheel drive sports sedan. And this platform that the Giulia rides on, it also forms the basis for the new Stelvio SUV that we saw for the first time at the LA Auto Show in November, and that's just about hitting the streets here in the U.S. now. But the Giulia, is aimed right at the heart of the compact / midsize sports sedan market. This thing is right on the dimensions of cars like the BMW 3 Series and the Mercedes C-Class and the Audi A4.
Really? It's that small? I thought it was more like 4 Series size, like just slightly bigger. No.
They're all within, a couple inches of each other in length and wheelbase. So, it's a fairly compact car on the outside. It's not real big on the outside, but it's actually surprisingly roomy inside the back seat. It doesn't, getting in the back is, the door, the portal is a little bit tight, so you've got to duck your head to get in. But once you're in there, you got plenty of head and leg room. That's not a problem. But frankly, that's not where you want to be in this car. For the U.S. market, the Giulia is available with 2 different engines. The base setup is a 280 horsepower, 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo. But the Giulia that you really want is the Quadrifoglio.
So this is what makes me suspicious, because I've read and seen lots of reports about the Quadrifoglio, which it better be good because it's a $70,000 car.
Yeah, the one I had stickered at $77,000.
Okay, so it's a $77,000. That's obscene.
Have you priced out an M3 lately?
No.
Or an AMG C63 or C43?
No, and
they're in the same ballpark.
Okay, but so you're launching your 3 Series C-Class competitor, and you're sending out basically your M3 or your AMG model sort of as the tip of the spear versus the more volume car. That makes me scratch my head a little bit. Like, what are they? Either they're trying to hide something, or they're trying to put their best foot forward.
You can get the 4-cylinder Giulia as well, and that starts at just $38,000 for rear wheel drive, so and that's a quick
huge
car.
Yeah, that's a huge delta, and so I will stop interrupting you and let you talk about the Giulia Quadrifoglio. But I'm really, really interested in the non-Quadrifoglio version too.
Well, I haven't driven it yet, but the specs on that one, top speed of 149 and 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds for $38,000, which is, it's in the same ballpark as the BMW and the Mercedes and the Audi. 280 horsepower. It's a quick car, but the the Quadrifoglio, going back to the 1920s, Alfa Romeos have worn this cloverleaf badge on their fender for, racing Alfa Romeos. And for many years, they've used it to denote the high performance versions of their street cars. And in this case here, on the Giulia Quadrifoglio, it's got a 2.9 liter twin turbocharged V6 engine, direct injected, 505 horsepower and 484 foot-pounds of torque, I think.
So that's not a Pentastar derivative, right?
No, this is a completely different engine. It's a 90-degree V6, it was designed in with help from the guys at Ferrari and Maserati. I think this is basically the same engine that you can find in like the Maserati. What is the smaller one?
The Ghibli?
The Ghibli, yes. Yeah. The Ghibli, whatever.
Ghibli. Weird named car. Yeah, anyway.
It's a fabulous engine. It's got tons of power, tons of torque. It's got a beautiful sound when you step on it.
Well, that's an odd fire V6 too, right? I think they make no bones about what that is, right? It's not. It doesn't have balance shafts or anything. So it's just, it has that ripping sound that an odd fire V6 will have.
Right. And, at idle, it's got that little bit of shake, kind of like you get with a big V8 engine, basically a heartbeat, not enough that it's annoying, just enough to tell you that it's alive and it's working, and what's really impressive, is this is a really easy car to, aside from the price tag, it's a really easy car to use as a daily driver because, just cruising around town, it's not particularly loud. It doesn't beat you up. The suspension setup is fantastic. The ride quality is really, really good considering that this car is running on 19-inch wheels with 30, 35 and 30 series tires front and rear. This is not rolling stock that, you typically equate with a really plush ride, but they've done a really good job of setting it up so that, it's got enough compliance that the wheels can move around, follow the road, but it maintains great body control. And, unlike some cars I've driven recently, it doesn't get bouncy over rough pavement. It maintains its composure, pretty much at all times. And then when you step on it, then you hear the engine just opens up, and it just sounds fantastic. And, the one unfortunate thing is they decide, I guess they were developing a manual transmission version. And at some point they decided to drop that for the US market. So we only get the ZF 8-speed automatic that you'll find in many, many other cars in this segment, and in other segments. But, it shifts really fast, really smooth. You've got the big long metal paddles that are mounted on the steering column rather than on the steering wheel, so they're always there. It's a beautifully responsive car, and it's just really nice to drive, and it looks great too. I mean, it
does. Yeah. So in terms of, it better have nice fit and finish and materials. And, those are the things that are going to make and break this car because it's unique enough that even if it has that bit of personality at this level, personality is a good thing. It separates it from the sort of the usual suspects. But how does it feel build quality? Is it up to par?
Yeah. I mean, certainly on the one I drove, fit and finish was excellent. There were no, noticeable issues that I could see. No misaligned panels or anything inside. Panel gaps looked even on the outside. The paint finish was fantastic. So nothing from a quality, from driving it for a week, there was nothing that I noticed that would be problematic. It certainly, was in keeping with what you expect of a $70,000+ car. The only the only thing really I would complain about, as is so often the case, is the infotainment system was kind of mediocre, and the voice recognition for the navigation was extremely hit and miss, mostly miss. But frankly, with a car like this, who cares about the navigation system? Just get in and drive. It doesn't matter if you don't know where you're going. Just drive.
Right. That's our take on it. Right. Is like you're better off getting lost. But on the other hand, those are things that are going to make a difference, especially when you're competing with Command and iDrive and whatever other systems. If you're cross shopping some other car, I mean, I'm trying to think of what else you would cross shop against it. And there's
MMI.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably it. Is the Germans?
Or Cadillac Q. I mean, the ATS-V, the Cadillac ATS-V is the other obvious competitor in this segment.
No, I haven't used Q in quite a while because I don't get too many Cadillacs at the moment. But that's already an also ran, or has that system been improved?
It's for the 2018s. It's got a significant upgrade. The upgraded system launched on the refresh CTS a couple of months ago, and it's coming to most of the rest of the Cadillac lineup for the 2018 models this fall. But it's it was an okay system. It wasn't the worst system out there. It wasn't as responsive as you would like. Sometimes it was a little slow to respond to taps and things like that, but the interface wasn't terrible. Yeah. It was fairly typical. What you find on a lot of cars. I've seen it was definitely far from the worst system out there. And this system, in the Alpha, it's not Uconnect, unfortunately, which, I think is a better system than what's in here. But it'll do. It's just not. It's not. Let's put it this way: it's not my priority.
Yeah, I mean, it's a. My guess is that it's a Harman system.
It is. It is a Harman Kardon system, as are pretty much all FCA vehicles these days. The thing that was really great, amazing about this thing was you're driving on the highway, and you squeeze the throttle to go past somebody, and the acceleration was just so effortless, and it's deceptively fast. Like when I drove the Nissan GTR a couple of years ago, this thing was brutal, or even the Alpha 4C last summer, they were much more brutal, when it kicked in and started to accelerate. I mean, you really felt it, and in this one, it's just all of a sudden you glance down and you have a lot more velocity than you had just a couple of seconds ago. And I'm not going to say just how much velocity,
just enough,
but it was significantly more than what I started with, within the span of a couple of seconds, and it just felt, it's a really great car that's really fast and fun to drive, but it's also very livable.
So that also brings me to the next question. Like so many cars in this class these days, it has switchable drive modes. Did you try out the advanced efficiency or, natural? I guess natural is sort of the mode it's going to boot up in maybe, but did you try any of those?
Natural is the one it boots up in. I kept it in dynamic mode most of the time, or sport mode. I think whatever the
dynamic,
next level
and
up.
then there's race.
And then there's race mode, but since I didn't have a track to drive it on, I didn't really need that one. In dynamic mode, it allows enough slip, of the back end, when you accelerate out of a corner that you can kick it out, fairly easily, and have some fun with it without getting yourself into too much trouble, or looking like too much of a hooligan on public streets. So it was fun.
Yeah. And did you try advanced efficiency at all? Which actually, so it shuts, it has cylinder deactivation and stuff, which I was impressed that they're putting that on this car. And I just was wondering what kind of economy gains you actually get out of it.
I didn't even look at the fuel economy. I didn't really care.
Who cares?
But it does have auto start, which works surprisingly well. And you can turn it off. But driving around town, it's where, you're not going to be, hopefully not doing, drag race starts at every intersection. It's fine. It's as good as any of the latest current systems that are out there. Restarts fairly quickly. By the time you move your foot from the brake to the gas pedal, the engine's already running and you're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could use another car in this class. It is beautiful, both inside and out. Their advertising is terrible, so they're working against the tide on that. I'm never going to say no to more high performance luxury European sedans because that's the sweet spot for me, having bought all the cast offs of the plutocrats back in the day. Seriously.
I'm actually quite looking forward to trying out the Stelvio when those get into the fleet, because it's on the same platform, but it's got, a 5-door hatchback body style. It's a crossover sort of, and it's only slightly taller than the Giulia. So from what I've heard, it's actually really good to drive as well.
Is this the Giorgio platform?
I think so. Yeah. I think it is. Yeah.
Weird names, but yeah. I mean, my hope too is that because this platform is supposed to serve as the basis for new Dodge and Chrysler vehicles as well. So maybe they can replace their 15-year-old machinery.
That would be a good thing. A new Charger built off of this platform would actually be quite a good thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Before I jump to my very similar week, I also want to hear about the Super Duty, which that's it follows the mold of the F Series. Has gotten some of those updates.
Yeah. So last week I dropped off the Stelvio at the airport when I was flying to San Francisco for a few days for a conference on autonomous vehicles that I was speaking at, and when I came back, I got the new F250 Super Duty, the 2017 model, which the new Super Duties, like the light duty F150s, now have an all aluminum body and bed on a high strength steel frame. It's all the same kinds of upgrades or downgrades, depending on your perspective, that the light duty trucks already got. Gave them some extra fuel economy, reduced the weight by several hundred pounds. And the one I'm driving has the 6.7 liter Power Stroke diesel. Why is it they can't give good names like that to their gas engines or even to their cars for that matter?
What was the EcoBoost supposed to be? It was supposed to be.
It was originally the Twin Force.
Yeah, that's a much better name.
Yeah. But so the timing of this one worked out quite fortuitously as I was building a new deck in my backyard. So having a big honking diesel pickup truck that with a nearly 4,000 pound payload capacity and 15,000 pounds of towing, was good for hauling a lot of pressure treated lumber back to my yard.
All those bags of concrete for the footings and everything.
That too, yeah. Bags of cement and lots of lumber and other stuff, hauling all that stuff back and forth from Lowe's. Worked out quite well. And, this truck doesn't even flinch. It is pretty tall. When you're loading those big, 12-foot 2x6s into the back of the bed, it's you got to lift them up a bit to get them into that bed. But, it didn't, the springs didn't even seem to flinch at the weight of all those pieces of wood in there. So,
well, you probably weren't anywhere near the payload. I mean, that's the thing too. Like the F-150 is sort of like the bread and butter truck, but really if you want to actually do work with your F Series, you kind of have to get to the F-250.
That's
yes
not
no,
necessarily.
Suppose, but.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, you can tow 12,000 pounds with an F-150, with the 3.5 EcoBoost or with the 5 liter.
That's true. The EcoBoost is really, I feel like that engine has been revolutionary in trucks just because it mops the floor with the V8.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think in the F-150, I think you get a maximum payload of about 2,000 pounds. So this one, this is the F-250 is the entry level of the heavy duty pickups. So, and the payload with the diesel is around 3,800 pounds, which is a lot, except that, the one downside of the one I have, it's a crew cab short wheelbase. So it's only a 6-foot bed. So, longer pieces of lumber are hanging out the back, or 6.5-foot bed. So it's, basically, unless you load it up with nothing but cement, you're going to have a hard time putting 4,000 pounds in this thing, for payload. But it's got 15,000 pounds of towing capacity. So if you need some serious towing, but if you're going to be hauling, bigger payloads, you definitely want to go for the longer bed, one of the versions with the longer bed, either the extended cab, with the 8-foot bed, or the crew cab with an 8-foot bed, which gets you a ridiculously long wheelbase of, I can't even remember how long it is. I think it's like 150 inches or 145 inches, something like that.
That's so long.
Yeah.
How did you find the 6.7 liter Power Stroke? It's all of these trucks are now ridiculous with their torque numbers too. This is 925 pound-feet of torque.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much that you don't even notice anymore. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, whatever.
whatever you need to do, it can handle it. You need to pull a house around, no problem.
Sure.
Just get a hefty enough chain and you're good to go.
Yeah. Leave it in first gear.
Yeah. You need to deforest your backyard, no sweat. Forget the chainsaw, just wrap a chain around the trunk and strap it to the back of the truck and you're good to go.
Well, it's an interesting engine. It was interesting. For the last podcast, talking with GM's engineer for their new Duramax, and just seeing that the diesel V8 is still fertile ground for innovation. This Power Stroke, this 6.7, it has a hot V, like some of the higher performance engines from like BMW. So the turbocharger is actually in the middle of the engine versus a pair of turbochargers hanging off the side, or one large one with lots of exhaust plumbing. That seems like the way everybody's going with the turbocharged V8, whether it's diesel or gas, is to reverse the flow from what the convention was.
Yeah, from a packaging standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. To put the V, or to put the turbo in the V of the engine, and then run the because then you've got really incredibly short runners from the exhaust ports right into the turbocharger, and then it feeds from the output of the compressor through the intercooler and over the heads and into the intake ports on the outside of the heads. And, this is the 6.7 liter, is an interesting engine. Ford introduced it, I think, in 2009 to replace the old Navistar diesel V8s that they used to use. And this one was designed in-house. And in its original iteration, it had a very interesting turbo design. What they did was the turbo had one turbine, which is driven by the exhaust gases. And then it had a double compressor wheel. So the compressor was like two compressor wheels back to back. And so it was a smaller diameter with less inertia. And it responded more like a twin turbo setup, but it was within a single housing.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. So
yeah, it's kind of an odd design.
But like you were saying, because there's not that much mass with the smaller compressors, it'll spool faster.
Right.
So, because that's one of the things that I remember about the older Duramax was, boy, there was noticeable turbo lag with that. So
yeah. So a couple of years ago, I think about in 2014 or 15, they updated the engine. They did a refresh on the engine. And this was before the new Super Duties came out. Gave it more power, more torque, and they swapped out the turbo for a more conventional one. It's a variable vane turbo, so you've got variable intake, so you still get a lot of those benefits of being able to control the spool up, so you can reduce the turbo lag. But it's a single compressor wheel now, and it works really well. This is a surprisingly quiet engine. It doesn't have any of the diesel clatter that you typically expect. I mean, I'm sure it's got lots of sound insulation around it and everything, but it's still a surprisingly refined engine.
Yeah, and
and it's getting about 15 miles per gallon around town.
See, I was just gonna say, but you didn't care about fuel economy, but you did with the diesel truck. Funny, you did with the high performance sedan. I guess you get your priorities in order. That's fine.
Well, it just, the fuel economy gauge just happened to be up, in the instrument cluster already, so I could see what it was doing. They, I think there was something somewhere in the, if you page through the stuff in the Alpha, but I couldn't be bothered.
So what was the trim level of this? Did it have, this
is a Lariat.
Yeah. So it had leather and stuff, right? Like
it's got leather and tons of chrome. Very, it's black with lots of shiny chrome on the grill and on the tailpipes and the wheels and the running boards and several other places. And it's like $66,000. So, this is not a cheap truck. It's a truck that, you buy because you need the capabilities of a truck like this.
But that's not that. That's actually cheaper than I thought it might be, because that's one of the things that has astounded me lately as well, is that just the price of the heavy duty pickups, or even just the regular pickups, when you start to option them up, they get abusively expensive.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's easy to get a light duty pickup, well over 50 grand. And with these heavy duties, I think the last time I had a Super Duty, back in like 2010, it was an F450 dually. And that one was, almost 80 grand.
Yeah.
It was a King Ranch.
I mean,
Jesus, it's insane.
It's interesting to drive those trucks, but also they're just, man, I don't live anywhere near where that's like a vehicle that gets seen on the road all that much in terms of, practicality, or, like you just like,
these are mostly sold in Texas.
Yeah. You've got to be working. You've got to have that truck like put to work.
Yeah.
And there's a legitimate use for them, and they're excellent.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
I mean, if you got a big, 15,000 pound trailer, trucks like this are, what you need to move them. And, if you opt for, a fifth wheel trailering package, you can get up to, I think on the 250, I think you can get up close to 20,000 pounds, or maybe it's over 20,000 pounds with a fifth wheel.
Just, with the fifth wheel, they'll tow whatever the hell you want, wherever the hell you want it. And it's like,
well, the current generation of heavy duty pickups, if you go up to like the 350s and 450s with the dual rear wheel axle, those things will tow close to 30,000 pounds now.
That's crazy.
I know.
And the point is too, like with the luxury, like this is a Lariat, and you still above that is what, Platinum and King Ranch, or King Ranch and Platinum, or Titanium, or whatever the Ford trim levels are.
Yeah, I'm not sure which trim levels they're offering these days on the Super Duties, but between the light duties and the Super Duties, you get King Ranches and Platinums and Limiteds, and they're. It was funny last year at the 2016 Chicago Auto Show. Mark Lenev, the VP of marketing, sales and marketing at Ford, did the keynote at the opening of the show, and he was talking about sales of pickup trucks, and he said at that time fully 1/3 of all F-Series pickup truck sales were these premium trim levels, like the Limited, the Raptor, the Lariats, and the King Ranches, and the Titaniums. 1/3.
Well, of course they are.
And these things are, you look at these things, and you're talking $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 of pure profit on every one of those things they sell. And they sell, 600,000-700,000 of them a year between the 150s and the Super Duties.
Yeah. I mean, it stands to reason. That's what I was going to say, was if you're putting these things to work, why do you have to suffer for it? Like if you're towing a heavy trailer, a long way, why shouldn't you be able to opt to do that in, a crew cab with leather, and that's relatively quiet and comfortable? I don't see any problem with that.
So right now I'm just looking at the Ford.com website, and on the Super Duties, it goes from XLT to King, to Lariat, to King Ranch, to Platinum. And then on the 150s, they also have a limited trim level in there between the just below Platinum. But the 2017 F450 Platinum starts at $77,000.
Right. So if you have the means, I highly recommend it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, good. We can stay with Ford. This week, I'm driving a Shelby GT350R. It goes away tomorrow.
And you'll be crying when it leaves, right?
I'll be a little sad. This is a hell of a car. In the past, I haven't been all that enthusiastic about Shelby Mustangs just because they've been big engine pigs. That's one way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, certainly they've been high performance Mustangs, but they've been high performance Mustangs. You know what I mean? Where this is an all out. This is a sports car, like a legitimate high performance sports car. Like you were talking about the Oddfire V6 in the Giulia. This flat plane V8 is absolutely bonkers. It's no slouch below 4,000 RPM, but it really comes alive at 4,000 RPM. And so there are times you're driving, you're like, I have to shift. And you look down, you're like, no, I got like half of the tach left. And it just has this sound.
Yeah, I mean, not so long ago, who could have imagined a Mustang with an 8,250 RPM red line?
Yeah, and 526 horsepower, and it wails like a racing V8 because of the firing rhythm, and it makes everything in the car, vibrate when you get it wound up past 7,000. But again, past 7,000, it's just an impressive engine. And it has the switch for like extra obnoxiousness to open up the exhaust baffles. So of course that's how I commuted in stop and go traffic through all of the very, very tony neighborhoods of Metro Boston. I'm just tearing through, not even tearing, like you're just going normal speed, but you leave it in like second gear and you toddle along at like 30 miles an hour. And the thing is just like roaring and spitting and snarling. And it's the best. And it's a real performance car. It goes like a bastard.
Yeah. I remember the first time I heard one of the prototypes, in Dearborn. I was across the street from the proving grounds in Dearborn, and I saw one of the prototypes coming out of the gate, and the driver pulled out of the gate and then just stepped on it going down Oakwood Drive, and holy shit, that thing was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it is so loud. So like on Friday, I'm driving home, I pull off the highway, and a dude pulls up to me, next to me. And it's like just some young guy in a beat up minivan. He goes, "That sounds amazing." There was an expletive in there as well. And he's like taking a video with his phone, and he's like, "Can you rev it up for me?" And so I'll take off from the light in first gear. Again, I will say this is one of those cars like the Hellcat that I had a couple weeks ago that you have to treat it with respect or it will absolutely bite you. And there's so many videos of Mustangs going into crowds. I did not want to be that guy. And it was very easy to break traction in first and second gear if you accelerate too hard. It's a very benign chassis until it's not. Once you get it crossed up, you're in real trouble. Because otherwise, the signs are there. If something, if it starts to get loose, back off. It backs off gracefully. It's fine. But yeah, it's a really well set up car. I didn't like how the steering's kind of numb. And I think that's just a Mustang thing. With the steering, it doesn't communicate quite as well. And that's partly because it's the electric power steering that they've got. Some systems are better than others. This one's not that great in terms of road feel. And it seemed to pull like opposite of what I would expect. So I don't know if it's just the way the chassis is aligned and the way the system is designed to, have the steering counteract some road crown and stuff. Cause I know that's one of the things that Ford does with their E-Pass system. But that, so that was weird. It would tramline a lot. So it's a handful of a car in some ways. But the other thing that really astounded me was just how much of just an easy car to drive it is. The clutch take up is really progressive. It's a light clutch. It's not heavy. You can leave it in sort of normal mode you can set the steering into comfort, and it doesn't drive too far off from, a 5-liter Mustang, which again, that's a car that it's a little bit beastie, that it's got power to it and you have to drive it accordingly, but it's not really that difficult to drive. And then, performance wise, it's up there with, I don't know, like a Corvette. I don't think I haven't really compared the numbers all that closely, but this is a serious performance car.
Yeah, I think, it's designed to be, it was designed to have a very different character from the GT500s, that we've had, over the prior decade. The GT500 was always more of, it was a car that, you could take it on the track on a road course, but it was really more of a drag race car. With its big supercharged, 5-liter V8 or 5.4-liter V8. Was it? Yeah,
I think it was a 5.4.
Yeah. It was a big, heavy engine in the front of the car. Especially in the earlier days, like when it first came out in 2007 through about 2010 or so. They took, they started with the engine from the previous generation Ford GT, but they didn't have enough cooling capacity in the Mustang to deal with to protect the aluminum block. So they used a cast iron block in that thing. So it was like 3,900 pounds, almost 4,000 pounds for the GT500. It was it did not handle all that well. But once they switched to an aluminum block, dropped 150 pounds off the front axle, it got a lot better. But, this one, going naturally aspirated, and just a high revving monster, it's it's a really impressive car.
I just love the naturally aspirated V8 too. I've driven my personal cars for 20 years were turbocharged. I just love the linearity of the naturally aspirated V8. And I also love superchargers again, because they're linear. You know what you're getting. And it's just, it's a really fun car to drive. It's set up really well. The Recaro seats are great. They hold you nice and snug. I can see how that might actually be a little difficult to get the exact position, because they don't power adjust. So there's that certain like seat back angle that may be in between the two notches that you're going to have to deal with that kind of stuff. It's definitely mean looking, and it's low. You gotta kind of watch the front, the front splitter on stuff, so you don't chew that up. If I'm going to give it any kind of criticism, it's that, the Mustangness is still there. And so that's not a fair critique, right? Like in the Mustang, the interior feels cheap at $40,000. Well, guess what? At $70,000, which is what this car costs, it feels a little extra cheap. But what are you going to do? I mean, that's what it is.
It's a Mustang.
Yeah, they're not going to give it like a pimpy interior. All the money went into the right places. It went into
it's all in the powertrain.
Yeah, and the powertrain is just fantastic. It's the 5.2 liter engine, and the I think it's a Tremec 6-speed is just it all works really well. There's no other car they have that could take this powertrain, so take it for what it is.
And this is the first volume production car in the world with carbon fiber wheels.
Oh, are they carbon fiber wheels? I didn't even notice. Huh?
Yeah, they're carbon fiber. They save, I think they save about 15 pounds per corner.
That's huge.
Yeah. 15 pounds at the wheel, unsprung mass, that makes a huge difference in the way the car rides and handles.
It handles like it's a weapon. It's certainly precise. This is great.
When you go outside, take a look inside the wheel in the interior of the rim, like behind the spokes, you'll see that there's a white coating on the interior of the wheel rim. And that's actually a ceramic coating to protect the carbon fiber wheel from the heat of the brakes, to reflect the heat of the brakes away from the wheel.
Huh.
They did some very interesting stuff on this. It's only on the front wheels, but because the rears obviously don't do as much. But this thing's got huge brakes.
It does. The huge Brembo calipers. 15-inch rotors and 6-pot calipers on there. So I mean, it's got some serious stopping power in addition to its acceleration. So I'm a little fuzzy on what the pricing is for this, because I have the Monroney here, and it's so it looks like base price for the GT350R is $47. That's for the 350, not for the R. Okay, so the R is the extra $13,500. Yes, on top of it. Okay. Right. So for the extra $13,000, you lose the rear seat and a bunch of other stuff. Right. It does have I really liked the Alcantara wrapped steering wheel and that kind of stuff. Like the rear seat delete. It's kind of a useless rear seat anyway. So it's sort of better pretty much that you don't have it. I think you probably get the Torsen differential and the track apps and stuff with the R. And I think the standard, or at least when it launched, I think they may have changed it for 2017, but when it launched, the standard setup with the R is you didn't get AC or an audio system either. Oh, so they charge you to put it back. Oh yeah. That's exactly what they did. That's the technology package. Right. It's $3,000. It adds back the AC and the audio system and navigation, which had Sync 3, which was pretty good. That's funny. Like that's a very Porsche move, and it's a very Porsche kind of car in that sense. Is the one you have a 2016 or a 2017? This one is a 2016. Okay. Yeah, because the 17s, they actually increased the price. They did some reconfiguration. So like in 2016, the first model year, the MR dampers, the Magna Ride dampers were only available on the R. They weren't on the base 350. And they made those standard across the board for 17. And there was some other things. So the base price of the 350 went to $56,000 for 17. And then the 350R jumps up to 63. Wow. That's like a $10,000 increase on that. I mean, we're getting very granular here. No, it's 7,000. Huh. Either way, I mean, just the regular Shelby GT350 that's a steal at $56,000. Oh yeah, I mean, when you consider the performance that car offers, it's actually not a bad price at all. No, and even the R, like I honestly can't think of a car that can touch this at $68,000, which is what this one's stickers at. Like again, like maybe the Corvette, but they're two different things. And a $68,000 Corvette is not really not as weaponized as this car is. You're looking more at like a Z06 to get something is sort of as extreme. I think. Yeah. I don't know. I may be off my rocker. Probably a Grand Sport. Yeah, maybe a Grand Sport. Grand Sport's probably more apt. The current the C7 Z06 is they're the supercharged. They've got the LT4. Yeah, that's a little. There. Yeah. They're quite a bit more. That's more the Z06 now is more like what the ZR1 was in the last generation. So that's just Dan showing his old man side. Back in my day, the Z06 was the one in between. Now it's the Grand Sport. All right. So we've had a good car week. Yeah. And, but not everybody at Ford has had a great week. No, not at all. Last week, the week started off with reports that Ford was going to lay off 10% of its staff worldwide. And that turned out to be a little bit off the mark. It was more like 10% of their salaried staff. Yeah. And they didn't really get in front of that story either, because a lot of it was sort of early retirements too, right? Yeah, it's mostly early retirements and voluntary separations, as they call them. Basically, paying people to go away.
So it turns out that the first two people that got their so-called voluntary separations were the CEO and the vice president of communications for Ford, Mark Fields and Ray Day, and those were announced this early this morning.
So, and this has caused quite a stir, as you might expect among the automotive news, but also just the regular news, and it's a little bit unclear why exactly this move was made. Certainly, there's been conjecture that Ford has had issues with messaging and sort of telling their story, and that they lag behind what GM and even Chrysler are doing in terms of partnering up with other companies and trying to find the way forward with the future, the way forward. That was one of their taglines. Interesting, Dan.
That was the one that Mark Fields came up with back about 13 or 14 years ago.
So, but they haven't really been as aggressive at transforming themselves into that mobility company that Mark Fields himself had talked about. But I think that's actually not true. I think that's the perception, is that they haven't been as aggressive. Yeah, but they have. They've made smart moves.
Absolutely.
And I think that. So it seems like now there's a lot of pile-on that Mark Fields just wasn't doing it, and I don't know that that's really true. And I heard Dan Neal on Marketplace today on my drive home, and he sort of made the same point. Was this is mostly a stock price driven move because he delivered record profitability for 2 years, at least 2 or 3 years for Ford during his tenure. And he did make smart, cautious investments in new technologies and partnered up with a lot of, companies doing this new work for what everybody sees as the coming sort of autonomous car future. So it's like he was doing everything right, but the line from Ford and from Bill Ford himself,
almost everything.
Well, right. He wasn't doing everything right. But he was, in terms of what a shareholder could expect, record profits is not too bad. And then, Bill Ford's
and very high dividends. Ford pays a lot of money in dividends on their stock.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. They have a surprisingly high dividend. So if you're a Ford shareholder, maybe the price of your stock is not going up very much, or in fact has gone down almost 40% over the last 3 years. But you're still making a lot of money through the dividends on that stock.
So was that the thing though? Like, while they're having record profits, the share price is down, and so that causes scrutiny from the shareholders. Like, hey, why is the share price down if you guys are killing it, as you say you're killing it?
That was certainly a big part of it. And just for reference, even this year, in what is, projected to be a down year for the industry. I mean, the last 2 years, the industry, in the U.S. sold 17.5 million cars each year. And this year is probably going to be somewhere around between 16.7 and 16.9, I think, is the current projection.
Yeah, but that's that's not a down. I mean, from the last 2 years, any year is
it's down from the peak,
right?
Okay, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So, but in this, quote unquote down year, okay, and Ford has said that their profits will, their after tax profits will likely be down, but they've projected that their pre-tax profits for 2017 are going to be about $9 billion. Just for reference, in 2016, Tesla's total revenue, not their profit or loss, their revenue, the total amount of money they brought in was $7 billion. So Ford is going to make, in a down year, is going to make more in pre-tax profits than Tesla's total revenue for 2016. So, that it kind of tells you how crazy this whole thing is. I think for some reason, the financial markets just can't seem to wrap their head around the idea of supporting a company, that actually makes physical stuff, employs people making physical stuff and sells it to people for money. They can't seem to wrap their heads around that concept. Instead, they'd rather buy up shares of a company that sells an app to do disappearing messages and put funny things on your face and selfies.
It's magical fairy dust. Bill Ford's line was actually really confusing to me. Was he just kept sort of repeating, we need faster decision making. I was like, I don't know that that's necessarily what you really do need if you're, a global auto manufacturer. You don't necessarily want right decision making, not necessarily fast decision making.
Well, I think, part of the messaging we heard today was kind of, they were clearly appealing to the market, to the financial markets, because, they were trying to, get some support to raise the stock price. For, the reality of the situation of why Fields left today. Well, actually, it's important to remember that Mark Fields was not the only one who left the house today. It was also Ray Day. Ray Day has been the head of communications at Ford for the last decade. And he's a controversial figure certainly within the automotive media. Not everyone agrees with some of the things he's done. And one of the things that has hit Ford in the past year in particular, during the election campaign last year, there was, Donald Trump actually, obviously took a lot of shots at Ford for, moving, their plans to move production of the Ford Focus from Michigan to Mexico. And from what I've heard from people, Bill Ford was not at all pleased with the way the company responded to those attacks from Trump. He thought that, the company should have been much more aggressive in responding to that and really telling the story of what was actually happening. They were moving production of the small cars, which were declining in sales, to Mexico, where they could hopefully produce them more profitably. And at the same time, the plant where the Focus is built today, the Focus and the C-Max is built today, is going to be retooled to build the new Ranger and Bronco, which are probably going to be significantly more profitable than the Focus or C-Max will ever be.
I mean, I don't care who the president is. The president, you know what? You go president. Leave the global car manufacturing to the global car manufacturers. If they need to relocate, if they need to move a product from a U.S. plant to a plant in Mexico, which is one of our NAFTA partners.
For now.
Yeah, for now. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the amount of trips, to and fro, across the border to build a single car, when you consider all the parts that are in it and the different suppliers, it's really that's a final assembly point. It doesn't, it changes a little bit, obviously. It changes a lot, actually, but it's still, both sides of the border benefit from that. It's
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, the whole way, the whole way the issue of where cars are built was politicized over the past year and a half. It's just ridiculous. It's clearly coming from a perspective of people who don't understand what's actually going on and haven't, actually looked at, the full spectrum of the situation. But having said that,
that's a different podcast.
In terms of the way Ford, not just Ford, but all the automakers, the legacy automakers, are being perceived right now is a challenge for all of them. It's a challenge for Ford, but it's also been a challenge for GM and for Daimler and BMW, and especially as they make this transition towards automated vehicles. Everybody is desperately trying to become perceived as technology companies. We've talked about this before. That's why everybody keeps going to CES, where they're showing off technologies that are 5 and 10 years away, rather than at the auto shows where they're showing the stuff that's going on sale 6 months from now. They're all trying to change the perception of themselves, and I think one of the complaints at Ford was that the communication strategy at Ford was not doing an effective job of creating that perception. And in part because of that, that was dragging down the stock price, because the financial markets were not perceiving Ford in what management thought was the right light, as a forward-thinking technology company. And Jim Hackett, who is taking over as CEO as of today, he's previously he was the CEO at Steelcase, and during his long tenure there, they make office furniture and things like that.
Forward-thinking technology company.
Well,
I kid.
No, but I mean, during the course of his tenure, the company did reshape the way they design offices and office furniture. I can't say I entirely agree with it, with the way offices have evolved over the last 15 years.
Well,
going to this
like the
whole
office?
open office. No, I frankly, I
hate
it. It works for some kinds of jobs, but for the kinds of jobs that certainly that I've done in my career, it's not an effective kind of approach.
No,
but that's a whole other story. The fact is, he did change the way that Steelcase made furniture, the way it did things. And he had a very good reputation as a leader there, and then subsequently he was on the board at Ford, the board of directors. And then over the past year, he was the chairman of Ford Smart Mobility, LLC, the division, the subsidiary they set up last year to handle a lot of this mobility services work that they're doing. And so, he's very well thought of in Silicon Valley. I met him one time at the LA Auto Show last November, and he's very highly thought of. And so, I think he was probably a good choice to bring in at this time. But the real reasons behind behind the departure of Fields and Day, is, I think it really comes down to the way the company was being perceived. Yeah, there were certainly some operational issues, and there were some other things that I've heard about that I can't verify, so I'm not going to bring them up here. But he let's put it this way: Fields was not as universally admired as Alan Mulally was, but overall, the company was obviously in no danger of going out of business anytime soon.
Which is probably a good time if you're going to have a management change to create that management change versus when you're in dire straits. You may at that point need to stick with people just, so you don't rattle the market or the investors or any shareholders or anything. And I can see that, and I can also see it over the last year, actually, slightly on that sort of decision-making side of things. General Motors has been exceptionally aggressive about sort of tightening their belt and saying, you know what, we're going to transform this company. And I say that while also noticing they've been kind of quiet about it to a degree as well. Certainly we've heard the fact that, GM sold off their Opel subsidiary to PSA, and they've pulled out of Russia and India and
South Africa.
So those are all those are not small moves for those are big things, and I feel like those have been almost downplayed to a degree. Maybe being inside the industry a little bit more like you are, and surrounded by folks out in that area where it is the business, it's had a larger impact. But out here in sort of the hinterlands, where we're removed from the car business a bit, those stories they popped up and then they just sort of went by. But those are big aggressive moves.
But they got the attention of the people, that all of these companies are trying to appeal to, which is, investors and, the financial markets, that are making big bets on these companies. Now, saying that they got attention, certainly, GM got attention from the financial markets for these moves. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's worked much better than Ford's strategy has worked for them in that respect. GM stock hasn't declined to anywhere near the degree that Ford's has, but it also hasn't grown either. It's been fairly stagnant of late. And, you've got this David Einhorn, who is, this big hedge fund manager. He's been pushing this plan for GM to create a 2-class stock system, for the company. One class that would be pay dividends out, and the other class would pay no dividends, but would be, targeted at growth, company, to make it, have the company be more like a tech company and really go for big growth. It's really kind of a ridiculous plan because, the dividend paying stock, basically would be a way to raid the company's cash position, and take the pull the cash out of the company, and for something like an automaker,
there's not
the nature of the business means that you need to keep a very substantial amount of cash on hand just to keep operating on a day-to-day basis.
And like growth. It's a saturated market.
For a car company, growth is not something that's going to happen. Period.
Yeah,
not to any significant degree. The overall industry is pretty much saturated, except for China, where there's still. China and India, where there's still growth, and even with the growth in India, as GM has shown, it's not profitable growth. It's growing volumes, but not really making any significant amount of money. And, China is the only place that's still, got any significant room for growth. So, what Einhorn is proposing, would be a disaster for GM if it ever got through.
Well, isn't that two classes of stock that Ford set up that way though? Don't they have Class A and Class B?
It's different though. There's lots of companies that have multi-class stock systems. Ford's, when they went public in 1956, they created a class of shares that is traded publicly, Class A stock, and then Class B stock are the shares that are owned by the family. So only members of the Ford family can own Class B shares. If family members sell any Class B shares to outside the family, they automatically get converted to Class A shares. And the distinction between the two is that Class B shares, while they account for about 2.5% of the outstanding shares of Ford Motor Company, they actually represent 40% of the voting shares. So the family gets 40% of any votes that happen from shareholders, even though they only own 2.5% of the company. And then there's similar kinds of things in, with a bunch of Silicon Valley companies now. Facebook, has a multi-class system where, Mark Zuckerberg, effectively controls 80% of all the votes. Google's got a similar thing, so that Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Eric Schmidt control most of the votes. And then, in fact, when I mentioned Snap a couple of minutes ago, when Snap went public a few months back, they also have a two-class system, and the shares that are owned, only the shares that are owned by some of the founders, including CEO Evan Spiegel, have any votes at all. All of the publicly traded shares have no votes.
They're there to pump money into the company and let you say you own this cool thing.
Yeah, they have no votes and no dividends because the company doesn't make any money.
We should totally do that. People can buy Wheelbearings shares.
Sure, why not?
You don't get a vote. We're never paying you back, but please send us money.
And speaking of companies that don't make any money in Silicon Valley,
hey,
there's Lyft.
Yeah. So what's going on with Lyft?
Well, apparently, when GM invested in them last year, invested $500 million in them, and they did a deal for Lyft to use GM's autonomous vehicles in its fleet, to develop those vehicles for Lyft to use. Apparently, it was a non-exclusive deal. And so while GM is continuing on with, developing their autonomous Bolts that they're going to put in the Lyft fleet probably sometime in 2018 to begin their pilot programs, Lyft last week also did a deal with Waymo. And they're also going to be testing Waymo's autonomous Chrysler Pacifica minivans.
So is that like controversial? Is it good? Is it bad? It's
actually probably good for Lyft. I talked to a couple of people at GM that weren't crazy about it. But they off the record, they said, they were kind of surprised at this and they were not thrilled that Lyft was doing a deal with Waymo. But it actually kind of makes some sense for Waymo because, for GM, they're working on the Chevy Bolt, which is a smaller car, and it's designed, to carry a couple of people around in an autonomous fashion. And from Waymo, they're going to be getting these bigger minivans, and, Lyft, like Uber and other services, they've got multiple different tiers of service, so they've got, their mainline, tier that's more like a taxi service. That's, usually when you order a Lyft or an Uber, like an Uber X, you get a regular kind of car to pick you up. And then both of them also have these carpool style services that are more like kind of like, mini buses, but without a fixed route. So, there's Lyft Line and Uber Pool. And when you order one of those, whichever one is on a route that's closest to where you are will come and pick you up. And, if you happen to be riding on it, the vehicle could stop at any time and pick up other passengers and drop people off, and can take a very non-direct route to where you want to go. And so I think, I'm guessing, nobody has said anything specific yet, but I would guess that what Lyft wants to do is have the minivans as part of their Lyft Line service, their carpooling type service, and test those out that way, and work on the algorithms for deploying, different types of vehicles for different use cases, depending on what the riders needed and, what they request at any point in time, and having the vehicles in the right place, that sort of thing. So that's probably what they want to work on, is having different vehicle configurations to test out their logistics system.
Well, hey, GM doesn't make any vans, so they can complain all they want. But, until I guess they could put like a 15 passenger Savannah. Do they still make the Savannah? I don't.
They do still make the Savannah and the Chevy Express.
See,
so they could use those. Probably, maybe a more likely scenario would be to see autonomous Ford Transits running in there as well. And it just so happens one of the early round investors in Lyft was a venture capital firm called Fontanellis, which is it's the VC firm that was founded by Bill Ford.
It just makes the head spin.
Yeah.
I mean, the automakers are definitely smart to get involved with it. I still look at the predictions and, given how long it's going to take, what are we going to see out of these investments that they're making? That's, I guess, if I'm a Ford shareholder and given the shakeup today and this to say like, hey, you guys need to get on the ball and make these investments in these companies. Like, what can I expect to start seeing from this? This partnership with Waymo. What do they get out of it?
For the investors or for the automakers?
Yeah.
For somebody like FCA, for Fiat Chrysler, it's a market for, some of their vehicles. I could see, what's interesting is, the way their current relationship is with Waymo. FCA, effectively shifts from being an automaker to being a tier one supplier to Waymo. So they're selling vehicle platforms to Waymo that Waymo installs their sensors and control, their computers and their software on, and it just plugs it in. So FCA effectively becomes just a tier one supplier, whereas, in the past, they've always been the OEM, and companies like Bosch and Continental and Delphi and ZF and all, Denso and all these other guys, they were their tier one suppliers. So now, they shift to becoming a tier one. So, for a company like FCA that hasn't really been developing much in the way of autonomous vehicles or, even, particularly advanced technology vehicles, it's potentially a way to stay in business.
Well, there is that. I mean, if you're in the car business, you don't want to go out of the car business unless you have a good sideline. Waymo also got there's a little bit of trouble with Waymo going on too, right? Like them and Uber sort of suing each other still?
Yeah, I mean, their lawsuit is ongoing. Uber or Waymo's suing Uber, and Anthony Lewandowski, who was a former Waymo engineer who left early in 2016, along with about 14,000, or allegedly with about 14,000 Waymo technical documents that he took with him when he formed a new company a few weeks later called Otto, which a few weeks after that was purchased by Uber for $600 million. Got to like that kind of turnaround.
Yeah.
And so, in the first major ruling in the case, the judge in the case, who actually is a surprisingly technically oriented judge, a guy named William Alsup, this is the same judge who a few years ago, when Oracle was suing Google over using Java and Android, actually taught himself to write code in Java. He learned how to write Java code so that he could understand what the technical arguments were in the case. And so, this guy's no dummy. And he in the first major ruling in the case, he ruled that Uber wanted to move the case to arbitration, so it would be in private, so it wouldn't be in the public eye. And he rejected that ruling, and he issued a partial injunction against Uber that, saying that they could not do anything on their autonomous driving program using any information that may have been purloined from Waymo. And they also had to return any documents that they might have. And the other thing is, he also referred the case to the Justice Department, which has already been investigating Uber for some other things.
Everything.
Yeah. So, now they're also looking into this case as well, to see if there's some criminal charges that might be relevant against Uber.
Well, that whole
and or Lewandowski.
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing just seemed really sketchy. Lewandowski had the plan to leave cooked up on his own, and he, while he was still working at one company, he had started the other and was taking there's something sketchy there, regardless of whether it's
remember, all of this is alleged at this point by Waymo.
I'm alleging that there's something sketchy.
Nothing has been proven in court yet. So
from what it seems like
this is what has been reported by Waymo.
Yes. What I have read about it seems like there's some sketchy behavior going on. Whether or not it's actually true, I guess we will see play out in the court of law. Anyway,
it certainly doesn't look good for Uber or Anthony Lewandowski and his colleagues.
Yeah.
Which is why a bunch of people have been jumping ship from Uber in recent months, including, I think we talked last time about Sharif Markby leaving Uber. He was one of the people running their autonomous driving program. He was a senior VP of technology there, former Ford engineer.
And those people are going to land at the other companies that are just, sort of getting stood up. The biggest among them is Lyft, is sort of the biggest, largest, most direct competitor. But man, there's a lot of companies working on this autonomous stuff. I still think it's funny. Like, we are not going to have this by 2023.
Well,
we'll have some stuff, but we're not all going to be. It's the modern idea of the jetpack, right? Like, it's not going to just all at once just happen, Yeah,
no, yeah, I totally agree, but not everyone feels that way. The conference I happened to be at last week in California, the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles Conference, one of the speakers there was a gentleman named Rahul Sonad, who is the CEO and co-founder of Tesloop, which is a Southern California company that provides inner city transportation services using a fleet of Teslas. So it's kind of, kind of like imagine like an inner city bus service, around Southern California, between like Santa Barbara and LA and Pasadena and Palm Springs, things like that, except, using Model X's and Model S's. One of the more absurd things that he said during a panel that he was on was he said, in 5 years, there's only going to be 2 car companies and everything's going to be autonomous.
Bullshit. Okay.
Yeah. So that's one perspective on this.
You have to admire
ridiculous
the hubris.
perspective, but yeah.
I mean, good for you. Hanging on to your convictions. Another thing that seems kind of like it's not going to happen, but maybe it could, is conservatives in England. We were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started. Conservatives in England are considering banning internal combustion cars by 2050.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And, the party of Margaret Thatcher, who have been notorious for wanting to privatize everything and get rid of regulations, and much like a certain party in this country,
much like her counterpart Reagan here back, her contemporary wanted to do. Yeah.
One of the planks in their platform, there's currently an election campaign going on, general election campaign going on in the UK. And one of the Conservative Party platform planks is to ban all internal combustion engine cars from British roads by 2050. And says allowances could be made for classic cars, but that cars purchased new would have to conform to the legislation. So they would have to be zero emissions.
I mean,
can you imagine the Republicans proposing something like that in this country?
No, given how in bed they are with the fossil fuel industry and how the fossil fuel industry, for all its bluster, has not done possibly the smart thing and started to invest. I mean, they have to a degree, but if I'm a fossil fuel company, I'm really going to invest heavily in alternative energies like wind and solar and battery technology. And no, we've got different companies doing that. I mean, to a degree, they're investing in those things. I get it, but it seems like they should sweat that whole dependence on oil thing a little less if they're branching out into other energy, if they become an energy company versus a fossil fuel company. But anyway, it doesn't. Do they understand where batteries and electricity comes from?
Well, increasingly in the UK, the electricity is coming particularly from wind. Most of the coal-fired plants have already shut down there, and so they're using natural gas and wind as the primary sources of electricity there now. So
is there natural gas coming? I'm assuming it's like North Sea, because that's where the oil production is around there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
North Sea or imported from other sources.
Yeah, and
I don't think they have much onshore natural gas in the UK.
Yeah. Oh, they got peat bogs though.
That's true. They do have that.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out on that sort of small scale, like with and I say small just because we're the United States and we're huge. But it would be an interesting experiment, I suppose. I don't know what that would mean for a nation to ban that. Like, where are they even going to find the vehicles to fill the sales pipeline at that point?
If you believe some studies, like one that came from a Stanford economist a couple of weeks ago, 90% of vehicles will be eliminated by 2030 with autonomous vehicles.
Remember what I said about bullshit?
Yeah, there is something in the air in California. I'm not sure what it is. It's not. I'm pretty sure it's not the smog.
No, it's the smog.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the smog.
Yeah, I mean, what would that? How is it supposed to work? Is it just like? Is there any more detail to this? Or just like,
I think the plan would be at some point probably, and the UK is certainly not the only country looking at doing this. Excuse me. Denmark and some of the other countries there, and Norway, would like to eliminate ICEs, certainly by the mid to late 2020s, by 2030. And if you could shift over completely, to EVs for new, for new vehicles by 2030, then, it's not inconceivable that almost all the cars on the road, as you replace the old fleet, almost everything on the road could be ICEs by 2050. Whether or not we can actually get there remains to be seen. Whether we can do that economically. The advantage that countries in Europe do have over here is high fuel. Because of the way fuel is taxed over there at much higher rates. Their fuel costs for gasoline and diesel are much higher than they are here, which has always helped to incentivize consumers to buy more efficient vehicles. And so the price differential, is not going to be as huge there, and it actually makes a lot more economic sense there to buy an EV than it does here, where gas is, $2.20, $2.30 a gallon still.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's actually, more possible in the UK or other parts of Europe to do this than it would be to do it here, unless you had some significant changes in fuel tax policies.
Well, you know what? Far be it from me to argue for doing things the way they've always been done, because that's a pet peeve anyway. So, yeah. All right. Go ahead, Britton. We'll watch.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Maybe 2050 is a long way away too. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? Yeah.
Lots of things can change. And, actually, by 2050, I think it's not inconceivable that the majority of cars on the road, and in fact, I think it's quite likely that the majority of the cars on the road by that point will be electrified. They will not be ICEs.
But so electrified, like plug-in hybrids, or electrified, totally electrified? Like,
I think by that point, probably most of them will be totally, either battery electric or fuel cell.
Huh. Well, all right. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
So have we,
or at least most recently,
have we had any feedback at all? I know we've been kind of quiet, so I didn't know if there's.
Yeah, no, I didn't see anything. We do have a couple of interviews that I recorded last week during that conference. One with the chief product officer at Turo, and they're a company that's got an interesting kind of business model for peer-to-peer car rentals or peer-to-peer car sharing. So basically you can, if you've got times when you're not using your car, you can make it available on Turo for other people to rent out.
Yeah. Our occasional social media guy, Dan, tried that out. And he was recounting his experience with it. So it'd be interested to hear what they have to say, like, straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. So let's run that one right now. It's about 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and introduce the last interview and then wrap it up.
All right.
Okay. So talking with Tom Wang, who's the Chief Product Officer of Turo. Tom, give me a little overview for listeners that are not familiar with Turo, what it is.
Sure. Turo is the largest peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace. And by that, I mean people renting cars from other people. There are 1 billion cars on the planet, and we're trying to make better use of them.
So how does this work? I mean, can anybody who's got a car just sign up for Turo and make their car available for others to use, or is it typically individuals, or is it more people that are doing this as a business to buying fleets of cars and doing it through your platform?
Well, people do it for different reasons, but by and large, it starts as an individual. We do have eligibility requirements for cars, so we don't allow any car in, but most cars are eligible if they meet our trust and safety standards and our mileage standards. But most people just start with the idea that they either want to take advantage of the marketplace in order to generate income because cars are expensive. They're the second largest asset class, usually in most people's portfolio, other than their home. And if you're paying $1,000, for example, every month for a Tesla, that's a lot of money. You could earn that money back by renting your Tesla out for 7 days out of 30 days in a month. And so a lot of people start with that. And in terms of what you said, the power owners, people who host multiple cars, they all started with one car, and then they got hooked. similar to an eBay phenomena.
So, how does the process work? I mean, how does your platform work? Does an owner just go and sign up and then go from there? I mean, what's the process?
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of education on our part, and we guide them through that and help them understand how they should price their car. And we use machine learning to help understand the best way to price the vehicle. We tell them about what helps them rent the car out, which are great, beautiful photos, great vivid description, and most importantly, the owner's behavior in terms of responding to the inbound request for their car. And so we try to set them up for success. One nice thing is our success is tied to their success. So we're both motivated. They want to rent their car out for money. We want that too.
I think, for most people that aren't familiar with it, they might be concerned about letting strangers drive their car. What happens if a car gets damaged? How does that work out? Is the owner's insurance responsible for covering that, or
no? We're thrilled to have a great partner, Liberty Mutual, who provides our insurance, and that's for both the traveler and, of course, for the owner. And for the owners, we take care of it for the owner, and for the traveler, they can choose what sort of insurance package that they want. We screen our travelers to make sure that they meet our trust and safety standards. And, we're a responsible company that's been doing it for a long time. I rent my car out. And I will say the first time I rented my car out, it's an interesting experience. And then the car comes back. You see the money show up in your bank account, and then the next time you rent out your car, you're like, this works. I mean, like anything, the first time you try it, something new. But I think our success and our trajectory shows that it's worth it.
So you mentioned screening the travelers, the renters. Yeah. What does that involve? I mean, do you check, get their driver's license number and check their driving record to make sure they've got a reasonably clean driving record, or how's that work?
We're constantly evolving and growing in terms of our trust and safety standards. It's another area where machine learning can be so helpful in terms of identifying all the different data points, because our community is so important to us. And like I said, we're in league with the owner in this regard. We don't want anything to go wrong because we're on the hook for it. And so it's very important to us to have a safe community. And there's a lot to build trust on both sides of the marketplace in terms of the reputation system, connections with Facebook. The reputation system is a huge investment for us because the reputation system helps ensure that in a marketplace, you can constantly give feedback to us, private feedback, public feedback, ratings on both sides, so we can constantly understand what's happening and react accordingly.
So if someone wants to rent a car through Turo,
yep.
What's the process? I mean, typically, if you go to Hertz or Avis or something, you're flying into an airport and you go to the counter and they pick up and give you the keys and you go get your car and drive off. What's the process with Turo? When an individual owner or an owner of a fleet, one of your power owners, is renting out cars.
Well, I should annotate your version of what happens when you arrive at the airport, because it's not exactly as you maybe 100% of what you portrayed. They go to the airport, then they go to the van that they get on, then they go to the line. Yeah. Well, the reason I say that is because it's important differentiation with Turo. Turo is a peer-to-peer service, and so someone delivers the car to you.
Okay.
And so you book the car online. We're an online service from the ground up. And then the owner coordinates with you, and they bring the car to you, and then they meet you, and they give you the keys, and you drive off. And then when you come back, they do the same. And so we believe that this experience that you were talking about has been a little bit stagnant for a long time. And so we're sort of revitalizing it with the creativity of our owners. And I know our CEO rents his car out too. And sometimes people, because he's got a very nice car, people rent it out for a special occasion. And he, like a lot of owners, will provide some champagne if it's for a wedding anniversary and things that you would never see in a traditional rental experience. And we see that people people want to have, they want that they want those 5 stars for the reputation system, and they want to provide a good, positive experience.
You mentioned earlier during your presentation about some owners actually using multiple different parallel services to give a more complete experience to renters. Can you describe that a little bit?
One thing they do is after they drop off the car, sometimes they use Lyft and Uber to get home. But I think what we're seeing is some cross-pollination with home sharing. So Airbnb, sometimes people will list their Turo on Airbnb or vice versa. And so we see some of that cross-pollination with the sharing economy, and it's very exciting to see that happen so naturally.
And I think you also mentioned that in some cases, the owners of the Turo vehicles are also driving on Uber or Lyft, and so they may instead of somebody having to take a ride somewhere, they'll go pick them up from the airport.
Yeah, I did. I was telling you an experience. There's a Portland community event. We have community events all over the country. We're in the U.S. and Canada, and at this event, one of these power owners were telling me that he drives for Uber, and he will people who rent the car, he will pick them up as an Uber driver. He will drive them to the Turo car, which is waiting at the Airbnb where they're renting, and so it's a stacking of sharing
services. Yeah. So just one last thing.
Yep.
What's the typical cost for somebody that wants to rent a vehicle through Turo? Yep. If you could maybe give me a couple of approximate price points, because I think it varies regionally.
Yeah.
But for somebody to get a typical midsize sedan or compact SUV versus a luxury car, what kind of prices would they be paying?
I mean, they're just one way to think about it is just take what you see at a traditional rental car company and just think 30-35% off, and that's generally the price range we're at. But it really depends. If you're renting a Tesla Model X, then that's something you just can't get anywhere else, so there's not a reference. But usually we're quite a bit cheaper with few exceptions. But we've looked at this data quite a bit, and if you look at overall in the U.S., we're about 30-35% cheaper.
And roughly how many people are making their vehicles available through Turo right now?
As of 2016, so we haven't released 2017, there were over 120,000 cars that have been listed on Turo, and it continues to grow. It's the largest peer-to-peer fleet, and at our current trajectory, it'll be the largest car-sharing service in the world of any kind.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
So, Chief Product Officer at Turo, talking about how their business works, and it's interesting. They have a partnership with Liberty Mutual Insurance. So, one of the issues I think with if you're going to make your car available to rent is how do you handle if the car's damaged or anything like that. I think that would certainly be something that would concern me. Before letting strangers drive my personal car. And so they've got this program with Liberty Mutual to actually provide the insurance on the cars when they are being rented. So when you're driving your own car, you're covered by your insurance, but when it's on the Turo system, it's covered under Turo's insurance plan. So any damage that happens, they take care of it, and they handle all the stuff. Basically, you just have to make the car available, and then you actually have to deliver it as well to whoever's renting it, and then pick it up.
That's interesting. Maybe I should do that with the Crown Victoria. Just sits.
Yeah, well, why not? I'm sure there's plenty of people that would want to rent that off you.
Probably not, but you can't hurt it.
Well, I think the next time I go on a business trip, I probably will give Turo a try just to see what the experience is like.
What have you heard anything about it? Like what's it like otherwise from reports in the field?
Well, we both know Alex Roy, right? And he's a big proponent of Turo. He really likes it. He's used it and really likes it. I haven't spoken to many other people other than Dan Mosqueda that have tried it. They've apparently got over 100,000 people that are making their vehicles available, and they're doing quite a bit of business. So, we'll see how that works out over the long haul.
All right.
And I'm sure we'll see other competitors as well.
Yeah. If there's a buck to be made, somebody else will come in and do it.
Yeah.
All right. So what's our next interview?
The next one is Peter Rawlinson, who is currently the Chief Technology Officer at Lucid Motors, guy behind the Lucid Air. Peter was previously at Tesla and worked on the development of cars like the Model S. He did a presentation last week, and we've talked about the Lucid Air before, and in terms of some of its technical stuff. But he got during the presentation last week. He got into more stuff about their business plan, and talked about some of the concepts around sharing. One of the interesting things around the whole mobility service idea is it's not all going to be just like automated versions of what you think of today with Uber. There's going to be a wide variety of different types of services at different price points, and I actually wrote a post for the Navigant Research blog where I work that should be up in the next couple of days, I hope. It talks about this, talks about the idea of some of the different services different types of services that are possible. But Peter talked a bit about that and some of the other stuff they're doing with autonomy on the Lucid Air. So let's run that one now.
All right.
Peter Rawlinson, CTO of Lucid Motors. You did a presentation here at the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles Conference, and among the things you talked about around with the Lucid Air, you showed a quadrant during your presentation with 4 different areas for vehicles: owned and driven, owned and autonomous, shared and driven, and shared and autonomous. And I was curious about how, as part of your business looking forward, how you see all of that fitting into Lucid's business model. Obviously, as a very high performance vehicle, it's clearly intended to be driven by owners. But do you also see this as a vehicle to be used as part of shared mobility services? And how does that all work out?
I think the theme of today's talk has been just how disruptive Lucid Air can be as a new vehicle platform and architecture. It can disrupt existing segments of the market in terms of what those cars are, and it can also disrupt usage patterns and can be used in a myriad of ways. There's going to be people like me who likes a high-performance car to drive and can afford to do that, and probably will buy that car in a traditional ownership sense. It's got a steering wheel, it's got very advanced suspension, it's a fine driving machine. It'll do 200 miles an hour. Not that I can use that on public roads, but it's got that performance. And so that's very appealing as a driving machine. I think that because it's got this incredible space concept, and it's got rear doors which open fully 90 degrees with great rear door apertures and great rear legroom. It's quite transformative.
Yeah, I experienced that when we saw it in New York.
Great. Well, so therefore, I think it's super relevant to a ride market. Now, in the past, a car was a great driving car or a great riding car. You've got something like a BMW, which is good to drive, or a Lexus is good to ride in. It's either or. With Lucid Air, it's really going to break that mold. It's going to break that age-old contradiction, that paradox between the two, with our active suspension as well. So we're going to have great ride quality. So it's super relevant for ride-sharing. Now, we don't see ride-sharing as commoditized at all. We see it as very differentiated. Just as your choice of hotel, choice of meal at a restaurant, choice of airline ticket is a very differentiated experience. Just because it's a transient experience, you don't own that aeroplane. You can choose between economy premium, business, or first. You never own the plane, but you discriminate. So surely if you're on a ride share, you can discriminate. If it's a hot date, you might want to take out a Lucid Air. If it's just a grunge commute around town, you might want to take something more commoditized.
Right.
So then we've got this new advent of shared ownership. Now, this is a really interesting one because that can tease out hybridized ownership models. For example, if you've got a budget of $35,000 And you can't stretch to the $52,500 price of a base model Lucid Air, but you really want a Lucid Air because it's such a cool thing. And with a state incentive, we recently announced the base model price is $60,000. It's down to $52,500 with the federal credit. So how do you get that from your $35,000 car that you could really afford to the $52,500 Lucid Air? Well, maybe if you one day of the week you let that car be shared, you maybe don't use it on Sundays or whatever, you can actually use the revenue that generates to pay for the monthly installments of the difference. So you could actually have this hybridized model where instead of owning a $35,000 car 100% of the time, you could use a Lucid Air for 5/6 days a week. And that could work. You could have some really interesting hybrid models, and it might not be as prescriptive as that. It's like when you go on holiday, you let it go for a couple of weeks. So I think you're going to have some very different type of hybrid ownership, hybrid use models. And then there's the whole world of ride share. And what do we do? Because we see ourselves as a service company, an advanced mobility company, as much as a traditional car company. We've got a car, but we're going to enter this arena. Well, if you look at the ride share companies, they've got apps. We got a car. We could do ride share with Lucid Air. All these are opportunities, but I've got to be careful what I promise, because all this depends upon successful foundations of the house, and the foundations of our house are a faultless execution of the Lucid Air of the car. Once we've got that, then we can look at all these future opportunities based upon those foundations.
Sure, and obviously at this stage, you're still a good year and a half away from starting production.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yes.
But do you foresee as one of the things that Lucid could potentially be doing is actually running a mobility service using your vehicles, or are you more thinking along the lines of partnerships or selling your vehicles to other services?
I think all of those are possible. You could do a hybridized. You could sell your vehicle with an agreement of a revenue from that partnership. I think you could do absolute versions of those or hybrid models of those.
So, and you're open to all the possibilities.
Totally. I think it's going to be a very inspiring and interesting landscape. And what we're doing right now is we can't analyse to death what the landscape is going to be like in 2 years' time. What we've got is a car which is very differentiated from anything else out there. And it's so eminently well suited for this new landscape. And by putting ourselves on the crest of this wave, it's like catching this wave with Lucid Air. We're going to be on the crest of this wave. Lucid Air is going to go into production just when all this stuff is building up to a crescendo. We're going to be right in there in this melee. And all I can say is we'll make the appropriate, hopefully wisely judged commercial decisions, but we'll have this fantastic attribute, this car which is so well suited to this new landscape. It's very difficult to predict what opportunities there will be. I mean, rideshare came from nowhere. It's like a social phenomenon. Nobody predicted it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a stroke of genius.
Like just in the last 6-7 years.
Suddenly, from nowhere. So, I maybe nothing like that will happen, but something like that again might happen in the next 2 years. We've got a product which really puts us right there in the forefront of this new landscape, and then we can make the decisions on that.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to touch on was just about the you were answering a question for someone else about the battery pack.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the cooling system in the battery pack.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could elaborate on that cooling system. You referred to it as you talking about water glycol cooling, and then you referred to the dry pack system that allows you to get to pack in more cell density, better energy density in the full pack.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
A little bit. Some of it's proprietary, and I have to be careful what I say.
Okay.
But some companies choose to cool the cells from their sides. So you put all the cells together and you try to get heat out the side of the cell. Actually, that is not a great place to cool a cell, because heat doesn't like to travel outwards on a battery cell. It likes to travel lengthwise.
Along the axis of the cell.
And in fact, generally speaking, it's very much more conductive along its axis, and it's quite insulated in its ability to travel across the cell.
Okay.
So if you try to cool it from its side, it's not a great place to start. And also, you put all this cooling in amongst the cells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So you can't get the cells in.
And if you can get the heat out of the ends, you don't have to put all these cooling pipes in amongst the cells, in where all the electric bits are. You can keep where all the electric parts are nice and dry, away from the water, and get the heat out beautifully along the axis of the cell. And you can get all the cells closer together, and you can point them all in one way, away from the car. So if they vent in a fire, they're burning away from the car. And these are very elementary, almost obvious steps. But to the best of my knowledge, this is breakthrough stuff.
Right, yeah, I haven't seen any other cylindrical pack architected quite that way.
There isn't.
In a simplified form, a simplified way of describing it, instead of the water jackets being around the cylinders like they would be in an engine, essentially your water jackets are sandwiched on top, and the cells are standing up in between the water jackets.
Yes, exactly. And actually, even on an engine, if you look at where most of the heat is at the cylinder head, so there's more water in the cylinder head, isn't there? There's the jackets around the cylinders are smaller, even in an internal combustion engine. But you're absolutely right in terms of your summary.
Okay.
Yeah. And by putting these really small logical steps in place, we have a pack which is easier to make as well, because we don't mix in loads of strange. So we don't have to have all,
simpler.
well, we don't have to have all these water connections inside the pack like a science project, which is mass produced.
Right.
Our pack is more productionized and productionizable.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Peter. I really appreciate it. Great to talk to you as always.
Great.
Okay, and then I think that's it for this week, right?
Yeah, I don't have anything else interesting to say. Some might argue I haven't had anything interesting to say for the entire show.
Well, they are clearly wrong.
Well, yeah, thanks. You're too kind. On that note, though,
I am, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, I'm lying to you, Dan. But in the meantime, since we haven't had any feedback for a little while, feel free to hit us up. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. And there's an email, which I don't remember, but
It's wheelbearingscast@gmail.com.
See, there it is.
And if you go to wheelbearings.media, you can find the links to all of that stuff. The Twitter and the email and all the other stuff.
All right.
And you can subscribe to the show. Make sure you subscribe in your favorite podcatcher app so you don't miss an episode. Everything, it'll just show up automatically every time we put one out.
Yeah. And you know what? I'd actually really like to hear from folks about sort of areas of coverage that they feel like we're missing out on, or they would like us to sort of dig into and comment on, knowing our particular focus. So, yeah. Toss us some thoughts and suggestions, some kudos, and some criticism if you have it, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next time.
Night.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.